Coming up today, the United States and China agree on new UN sanctions to punish North Korea for its recent nuclear test and long-range missile launch. The White House says they will be the strongest yet. The marathon speeches keep on coming at South Korea's National Assembly as the main opposition party's filibuster against the long-pending anti-terror bill stretches into a third day. Plus, consumer sentiment slumps to an 8-month low as local and external uncertainties weighed on Koreans' views of the economy. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Thursday, the 25th of February. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime. The United States and China have finally reached an agreement on the UN Security Council's new sanctions on North Korea following its recent missile and nuclear tests. This raises the likelihood of the draft resolution being sealed soon. Let's connect live to our Foreign Affairs correspondent Geunhye at Seoul's Foreign Ministry. So, fill us in.
Hi, Mark. The White House has confirmed within the last 2 hours or so that the U.S. and China have agreed on the draft resolution that's been under discussion for several weeks now. Now, this is a breakthrough as the two superpowers not only wield veto power on the Council, but were the two countries that have been clashing most about the level of sanctions to be levied on Pyongyang. The White House did not give details on the agreement, but said in a statement that it goes beyond previous resolutions. It also mentioned that Chinese President Xi Jinping will attend the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington late next month. Now, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is currently in the U.S. and has held meetings with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice, during which President Obama made a surprise appearance too. And during those two meetings, they held final discussions on the UN sanctions. Now, there is a chance the resolution could be adopted as early as Friday and most likely before the month is out, but only after the other 13 members of the Council have given their final yes vote.
So the White House did not really elaborate much on the type of sanctions, if at all, really. But are we hearing any unofficial word out of either Washington, Beijing, or the UN headquarters?
Well, Mark, unnamed sources say that while the exact details are not yet available, the resolution does include the strongest punitive measures yet. According to reports, three of North Korea's key agencies, the General Reconnaissance Bureau, which is in charge of intelligence operations, and the Ministry of Atomic Energy Industry and the National Aerospace Development Administration, which oversee the regime's nuclear and missile programs, are expected to be sanctioned. In total, around 30 individuals and entities are said to become targets. And a ban on imports of coal, iron, and other minerals from the north, one of Pyongyang's biggest sources of cold, hard cash, could also be included. Now, that's all I have for now, but I'll be updating you throughout the day. This has been Geunhye from Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry. Mark.
Thank you, as always, for your report, Soa. Now, South Korea and the United States are expected to hold their first joint working group meeting in the coming days on the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system to the Korean Peninsula. Speaking at the U.S. House Armed Services Committee on Wednesday local time, U.S. Forces Korea General Curtis Scaparrotti said it will take some time to deploy the system to the south as the working group has to decide on the optimum location and other related details. It will also have to be coordinated in accordance with the Status of Forces Agreement that governs issues of U.S. troops stationed here in South Korea. Scaparrotti said the first meeting is expected within 1 week's time. The U.S. general said the THAAD deployment is important and necessary to build a layered defense in light of the growing threat posed by North Korea. Now let's go over to the National Assembly, where South Korea's main opposition party is leading a filibuster against a controversial counterterrorism bill that they say will give the nation's spy agency undue power. Our Ji Myung-gil is on the line with the details. Myung-gil, fill us in.
Mark, it's the third day of the filibuster. A Justice Party lawmaker is on the floor now, becoming the sixth opposition lawmaker to speak. Yesterday, lawmaker Eun Soo-mi from the main opposition, the Minju Party of Korea, spoke for 10 hours and 18 minutes, setting the Korean record for the longest filibuster. The Minju Party initiated the filibuster to block a controversial counterterrorism bill it says will give the National Intelligence Service the power to eavesdrop on citizens, infringing on their right to privacy. The spy agency has been embroiled in numerous political scandals over the years, including allegations of election meddling. The ruling Saenuri Party and the president say the bill will better protect the public and the nation, and the opposition should stop delaying the vote.
Myung-gil, lawmakers were scheduled at least to vote on Friday on a bill that would redraw Korea's electoral districts. But with this filibuster now in its third straight day, what's the chance of that actually happening?
Well, the two main rival parties reached agreement on the electoral map bill on Tuesday, laying out a plan for 253 electoral districts plus 47 proportional representatives to fill the 300-member legislature. The bill is being reviewed by the Interior Ministry today and will likely be sent to the Assembly on Friday so that lawmakers can vote on it. But if the filibuster continues, lawmakers won't be able to vote on the issue. The delay in redrawing the electoral map, which became invalid at the end of last year, has already dealt a blow to candidate registration and campaigning and could create a chaotic situation ahead of the general election on April 13th. Well, that's all for now, but I'll have more updates in our later newscast. I'm Ji Myung-gil reporting from the National Assembly.
Thank you, Myung-gil, for that report on the filibuster taking place as we speak at the National Assembly in Seoul. Now, in other news, marking her third-year anniversary at the top office, President Park Geun-hye visited the Daejeon branch of Korea's recently established innovation centers to stress job creation and economic revitalization through new growth engines. The national chain of centers has already attracted over $100 million in investment while helping nearly 600 startups turn their ideas into businesses. At the Daejeon Center, job seekers and startups who received one-stop services shared their experiences with the president. She also spoke via video call with some of those taking part at this year's Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, hearing how the innovation centers supported their debut on the international stage. So, as we just heard, President Park Geun-hye enters her fourth year in office on this Thursday. In the fourth of our series of 5 special reports, we're going to take a look at the keywords that have shaped the president's public remarks, reflecting her time in office thus far. Our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-son with the report.
What was President Park Geun-hye's key focus during her past 3 years in office? The presidential office has analyzed over 1,000 remarks the president has made in public speeches and press briefings using big data. The word she has used the most is people, which she mentioned over 5,000 times, followed by Republic of Korea. Next on the list was the economy, which has certainly been a key focus for her since her inauguration.
어렵게 시작한 경기 회복의 불씨를 반드시 살려내서 경제를 활성화하고 민생을 안정시키는데 국가적 역량을 집중해 나갈 것입니다. 창의와 혁신의 기반을 둔 경제로 체질을 바꿔가면서 국민소득 4만 불 시대를 여는 기반을 다져가겠습니다. 그동안 추진해온 경제혁신 3개년 계획을 잘 마무리하고 창조 경제와 문화 융성을 확실하게 뿌리 내려서 우리 경제의 활력과 일자리를 만들어 갈 것입니다.
The president has also made frequent mention of the phrase creative economy, reflecting her continued emphasis on growth through entrepreneurship. Other key phrases on the list were also about the economy, including economic revitalization, economic innovation, and job creation.
The president's creative economy drive is now in full swing with the launch of 17 centers completed last year. The centers aim to foster startups by matching them with advisors and corporate partners that can help them launch their businesses. Young job seekers can also get help at the employment zones within the centers.
Thanks to the mentoring from the Innovation Center and technical support from Hyoseong, we finally succeeded in developing a heat inducer using carbon fiber.
I moved to a new town and it was difficult to find a new job on my own. Then I heard that the local employment and welfare center was hosting an employment fair. That's how I found my job.
In keeping with these initiatives, President Park has vowed that 2016 will be the year that people feel the effects of the policies she's put in place and called on the people to help the country make another leap. 송지선, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's consumer sentiment worsened for the third straight month in February as government measures to jumpstart spending lost steam and economic uncertainties refused to go away. The Bank of Korea's Consumer Sentiment Index came in at 98 this month, down 2 points from January. The central bank attributes the drop to a recent slowdown in exports coupled with risks stemming from North Korea's recent provocations. This month's figure also marks the same level posted in June of last year when spending tumbled due to an outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome. A reading below 100, which is what it's at now, means pessimists outnumber optimists. And banks across the world are being hit hard with profits on the downward slide on the back of a slowdown in the global economy and low global oil prices. Kim Min-ji has more.
Standard Chartered posted its first annual loss in 26 years on the back of restructuring costs and faltering commodity prices. The bank's pre-tax loss stood at $1.5 billion, missing analyst projection of $1.4 billion. Its bad loan ratio also surged almost 90% from the year before to $4 billion. It wasn't much different for HSBC. The bank posted a loss of over $1.3 billion in the fourth quarter of last year, which was in stark contrast to the profit of $511 million it recorded in the same period in 2014. Global banks haven't been doing well with the slump in the global economy, leading to weak performances by companies and falling oil prices taking a toll on crude oil companies. However, in what could be a sign of light, banks in the U.S. are faring relatively well. According to the U.S. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, nearly 6,200 commercial banks in the U.S. posted a combined net profit of $40.8 billion, up almost 12% from a year ago. The growth was attributed to a firm economic recovery and a rate hike by the Federal Reserve at the end of last year. But with many central banks adopting negative interest rates, experts aren't predicting a rosy outlook, as the sub-zero rates will lower the net interest margin, which in turn will pull down banks' operating profits. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Brazil has performed an about-face on its previously held stance and released figures confirming the damage caused by the Zika virus. The country's health ministry says lab testing has identified a link to 67 infants so far. Now, just a week prior, the ministry said it would not be making such figures public. Officials say that since late October, there have been 583 confirmed cases of microcephaly, a condition that causes babies to be born with smaller skulls and underdeveloped brains. As of February 20th, there have been 120 suspected microcephaly-related infant deaths nationwide in Brazil. Now, when it comes to eye-watering levels of debt and general economic turmoil, Greece and Spain spring to mind, as both went through a torrid time in the aftermath of the financial crisis that rocked the Eurozone a few years ago. But unlike Greece, Spain appears to be on the road to recovery. And an expert says other countries should learn a thing or two from Spain's response. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports from Barcelona.
Spain was one of the countries hardest hit by the 2008 global financial crisis. Its economy was left in tatters after the bubble burst on its housing market and national debt soared. Even some 8 years later, the Eurozone's fourth largest economy is still suffering from one of the worst unemployment rates in the bloc at around 20%. So can it truly be said that Spain is back on its feet now?
Spain has been working hard to dig out of its hole after it was forced to ask for an EU bailout in 2012. And those efforts seem to be paying off as its economy is recovering on the back of rising consumption.
The Spanish government's austerity measures, while painful, have helped the country recover more flexibility in its labor market. However, this came at the expense of big cuts to pensions and healthcare services. Soaring domestic consumption, industry investment, and record tourism also helped the Spanish economy grow 3.2% in 2015, its fastest pace since 2007.
The banks have understood that it's better at the end to restructure the debt and to get it paid later, but to get it paid, then don't do the restructuring and then having the company go bankrupt and lose everything. So a lot of this has already been done, a lot of this renegotiation. So I think that the economy is now in a much better shape and going up reasonably.
The International Monetary Fund forecasts the Spanish economy will grow 2.7% this year. The professor says the recovery in Spain and some other European countries are good reference cases for a country like China that is also restructuring its economy.
So sometimes the press says the economy collapses, goes from 7 to 6.9. Well, that's not a big collapse. But if you go into depth, you see, okay, there is people who were doing quite well, that they do well but not so much, have gone down, and people who were very poor, then they go up. So at the end, it's much better, this 6.9, than the other, because this generates a lot of consumption.
He says countries that depend on China for exports would also benefit as demand for their goods and services would increase. However, the professor adds that a Brexit or Britain leaving the EU would severely damage the Eurozone, as it will lose its biggest English-speaking finance hub. Brits decide on whether they want to stay in or leave the EU in late June. Kim Jeon, Arirang News, Barcelona.
A movie about the painful experiences of Korean women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese during wartime has topped the box office here in Korea. Spirit's Homecoming drew more than 153,000 people on Thursday, its opening day, edging out Hollywood blockbuster Deadpool. The film, which is based on statements from surviving victims, was made with funds donated by more than 75,000 supporters both in and outside of Korea. Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in to our newscasts, and we'll be back throughout the day with more bulletins. Until then, goodbye.